Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Mandy Feeks. I am a Community Prevention Project Coordinator with ESD 112, and I'm currently working on a grant-funded project to prevent opioid misuse among youth. And I sit on our Prevent team. If you're not familiar with Prevent, we are a community coalition that formed more than 20 years ago now, and our goal is to increase collaboration and reduce youth substance use. And so we offer support and technical assistance all throughout Southwest Washington and also in rural communities throughout the entire state. Now, today we're going to be discussing a campaign called Friends for Life, which is focused on increasing awareness and education about the risks and harms of illicit fentanyl. And this training will be structured as a train the trainer model. And so my goal is for each of you to take this information that you're learning today and use it within the context of your role in supporting youth. However, it's very, very important that as adults and as educators, we understand a topic before going out and presenting that information to young people. And so I want to start out by providing you with education about opioids and illicit fentanyl and the best methods for prevention. And this could feel like review for some of you, and that's okay. But my hope is that you'll leave this session feeling a little bit more confident and with a plan to use this knowledge and these lessons learned within the context of your professional role at schools. So what's today going to look like? I will start by presenting information about Friends for Life. It is an evidence-based prevention program, and we'll go through everything outlining, what are opioids and fentanyl? Why is this type of education important? What resources are available to support you with implementation in your schools? Where can I find these resources? And then I'll actually do a demonstration of the classroom curriculum itself. After that, we will take a deep dive into best practices for use of the Friends for Life campaign. And my hope is that each of you can incorporate opioid and fentanyl education into your existing substance use classroom curriculum that you already provide to students. So most of you are likely here because you teach some sort of health education to students. And so we hope that this just fits in seamlessly with what you're already doing. And that way, if you're having this in schools year after year after year, it's really sustainable long term. Now, why is this topic important? In Washington and actually all over the United States, illicit fentanyl and other powerful additives are making street drugs more unpredictable and more harmful. And about 70% of overdose deaths in Washington involve fentanyl. And unfortunately, we are seeing opioid-related overdoses increasing among our younger populations. So that's the really tough reality of it. The reason that we're seeing this increase are because there's widespread availability of illicit fentanyl. The street dealers are creating counterfeit pills that resemble prescription drugs but actually contain illicit drugs, and also the ease of purchasing pills through social media. And in response to this and to combat this public health crisis, Washington state legislature took action. They passed House Bill 1956. And what House Bill 1956 required was that the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, or OSPI, disseminated instructional materials all over the state to middle and high schools, and that they updated the Washington K through 12 learning standards to include opioid prevention education in middle and high school classrooms. And so essentially, they made an amendment to an existing requirement. So since schools are already teaching about substance use and abuse, it is now recommended to add opioid education to what's being shared with students and families. And that's because we are seeing the use of opioids trending upwards. And so in the updated learning standards that were released to schools, Friends for Life is the recommended instructional support. So if you have any questions specifically about what OSPI released about the learning standards, talk to your schools first. And then if they have questions, I recommend reaching out to OSPI. I've got a couple of contacts on the screen up here. So Ken and Lori are both really great. And then in those actual learning standards that went out to schools, their contact information is listed as well. Now, what is Friends for Life? Some of you may not have heard of Friends for Life yet. Friends for Life is a campaign that was designed by a consultant hired through Washington Healthcare Authority, and it's all available online. It's an evidence-based program that, again, was developed to increase awareness and education about illicit fentanyl. But the name Friends for Life really has a lot of meaning to it. And the title was inspired by young people's care for their friends and their instinct to keep one another safe. And so, as the designers were going through and creating this, they worked directly with youth, and ultimately they chose a concept that led with empathy, and they worked really hard to avoid any sort of stigmatizing language and to avoid scare tactics. There are four main goals for the Friends for Life campaign. The first is to define what illicit fentanyl is and how it's affecting Washington and how it's affecting youth as well. The second is to explain how to help teens avoid opioids like fentanyl. The third is to describe how to spot and respond to an opioid overdose. And the fourth is to share ways to access and use naloxone or Narcan. The campaign is very comprehensive. There are presentations, posters, social media content, parent and student brochures, much, much more. There are multiple different presentations depending on the age group that you're working with. Currently, there are resources for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and parents. Both student presentations come with a hands-on activity that can be completed for a more interactive approach to the education. And they also have pens, stickers, buttons, things that you can give out during that activity. And for the purposes of this training session today, I will describe what the activity is, but we won't actually do it together since time constraints, and also this is a virtual format, but there is a lesson plan that comes with it. And so you can print that out and use it to help plan your class that day. But this campaign is being used all over the state of Washington, so we'd love to see more schools teaching about Friends for Life in the Southwest region. Okay, let's dive into a demonstration. This is the high school version of the Friends for Life curriculum. You'll see that's what the HS stands for. But the differences between the presentations are pretty minimal. There's just some subtle changes to the language that's used. And for the high school one, we'll go into a little bit more depth with examples of different types of drugs and the names. The activity is also different. So if you're watching this, but you actually teach to a different age group, that's okay. You can still complete the training, but just be sure when you're going to download the materials from the Friends for Life website that you're choosing the age appropriate ones. One other note before I jump in, please know that when I actually lead this for students, I try to make it as interactive as possible. I ask tons of questions, I get them talking, I get them brainstorming. Sometimes I'll give out prizes or giveaways if they provide a really thoughtful and thorough response to something. But since the purpose of this demonstration is really focused on training adults and educators, I will tell you the questions that I typically ask, but I don't expect an answer. But when you use this curriculum in the classroom, just know that it could take a little bit longer to complete because students are going to be interacting with you. They are going to be taking time to complete the activity. And so as I'm walking through, I'll kind of try to put my different hats on. You'll hear my presenter voice, and then I'll jump in with like a tip or a trick or something. I'll try to kind of pop back and forth. Welcome, class. Today we're going to be talking about opioids, fentanyl, and fake prescription pills. But before we get started, I just want everybody to raise their hand if there's someone in your life that you care about. The hope is that everybody will raise their hand. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's yourself. I care about myself. And it's really important that we keep the people that we care about in our life safe, right? So we're going to be talking about a program called Friends for Life, and it's all about how you and your friends can be informed, stay safe, and avoid illicit fentanyl. This is an overview of everything that we're going to cover. We will start by talking about the basics of opioids and illicit fentanyl, including how this issue is affecting people your age in Washington. Then we'll talk about what you and your friends need to know to avoid opioids like fentanyl. And then we'll talk about naloxone or Narcan, which is a medication that helps to reverse an opioid overdose. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of opioids or think you might know what they do? As students start to raise their hands, this is a great time to prompt with additional questions. Like, well, have you heard of fentanyl? Where have you heard about it? What is fentanyl? And this kind of gives you a sense of what students already know about the topic. Just to make sure that we all have the same facts, I want to briefly touch on the basics. Opioids are a type of drug or medication used to manage and relieve pain. And they work by binding or attaching to the nerve receptors in our brain and our spinal cord and in other organs in the body, which then act to reduce pain signals. And as you can see on the screen, there are a couple of different versions of opioids. We have regulated and unregulated versions of opioids. So regulated versions of opioids are legal. OxyContin or Vicodin are examples, and they're often prescribed following surgeries or injuries, or they can be a part of a cancer treatment plan. Whereas unregulated or illicit opioids, like heroin or fentanyl, those are sold illegally as street drugs. And there are several key differences between regulated opioids and unregulated opioids, including how they're made, where they're made, and who gives them out. And these measures are designed to help keep people safe. So regulated opioids are legal, they're highly controlled, they're made in official labs, and the amount of medicine in each pill is the same. And these are prescribed by medical professionals and they are dispensed through pharmacies. So has anyone ever gone to pick up a prescription at the pharmacy? Maybe you got sick, maybe you have an inhaler, or you went with your parents to get a prescription. Well, when you get a prescription from the doctor, it's really, really important that you follow the exact instructions that you are provided. Unregulated or illicit opioids are uncontrolled. They're made in underground labs, and they are sold illegally on the streets and on social media. And illicit fentanyl is considered an unregulated opioid. And a part of what makes it so harmful is that it's made in this uncontrolled environment. And so that means that the strength of each pill or the strength of each batch of pills can be very different and impossible to predict. And so some pills may contain very little fentanyl, whereas others contain lethal doses. And there's not a way for us to tell them apart. There is no way to tell how much fentanyl is in something based on how it looks, how it smells, or how it tastes. So someone tell me again, what's the main purpose of an opioid? Pain relief. Pain relief is the main effect of opioids. However, there are side effects associated with taking an opioid. And two of the main side effects are sleepiness or feeling drowsy and slowed down breathing. And if someone were to take too much of an opioid, they could experience an opioid overdose. Can anyone tell me what an opioid overdose is? So an overdose means that a person has more opioids in their system than their body can handle, and that causes their breathing to slow down. And an overdose can come on very quickly, it can be life-threatening, and the overdosing person is going to appear to be sleeping, but they can't wake up, even if they're shaken, even if they're yelled at. And without any sort of medical intervention, their breathing could stop altogether. Now, if you were to encounter somebody who is overdosing, aside from slowed down breathing, there are some signs that a person may have overdosed. Their skin could turn blue, gray, or purple. Does anybody know why would their skin turn blue, gray, or purple? This is because they're not getting enough oxygen. So they may appear pale, ashy. They may have cool skin if you were to touch them. You may also notice blue or ashy white lips or blue or purplish fingernails. And opioids can be habit forming or addictive, especially if they're misused, if they're taken in large doses, if they're taken too often, or if they're taken as a way to get high. Now let's talk specifically about fentanyl. Fentanyl is a powerful, fast-acting opioid. And this is a really good time to get students involved by asking them, like, how much stronger do you think fentanyl is than other opioids? And you may have to cover up the answer on the slide, but see if you can get them guessing. How much stronger is fentanyl than other opioids? It is about 50 times stronger than heroin and about 100 times stronger than morphine. And there is a legal version of fentanyl. It's used in medical settings and it is highly regulated. And then there is an unregulated or illicit version of fentanyl. And illicit fentanyl is sold on the streets or on social media. It's usually in the form of a pill or a powder. So it can actually be pressed into pills that look just like real prescription pills. So it may look like OxyContin, Adderall, Xanax, or Percocet. But these pills are fake and they're nearly impossible to tell apart from the real prescription pill that they are designed to look like. Illicit fentanyl can also be mixed as a powder into other types of illegal drugs like cocaine or like MDMA. And like we mentioned, fentanyl is very strong. A really, really tiny amount can be enough to cause an overdose. It actually only takes about a 2 milligram dose. Can anybody tell me how much is 2 milligrams? And responses may vary here. Some common analogies are the tip of your pencil. I typically use a few grains of salt. So if you take your salt shaker at home and pour it in your hand, just a few small grains of salt are equivalent to what could cause an overdose. And fentanyl is also fast acting, so that means overdoses tend to set in very quickly, and it can be lethal the first time that you use it. So this is what you need to know about how this issue is affecting people your age. In Washington, close to 70% of overdose deaths involve fentanyl, and this is impacting people of all different ages. And recently, we have seen more overdoses occurring among young people. And those who are encountering illicit fentanyl often do so by accident because they didn't realize that a pill was fake. And so just by being informed and educating one another, we can help to keep each other safe. However, what I want you to know is that most teens are not actively seeking out or knowingly experimenting with fentanyl. Can anyone guess the percent of students that are not experimenting with prescription pills or are using them as a way to get high? Again, students seem to love guessing games, and they'll usually start guessing around like 50%, you know? So you can tell them higher, higher, higher. And remember, they're trying to guess the percentage of students that are not experimenting with pills. And ultimately, somebody will guess it and you'll say, correct. 99% of teenagers do not use pills as a way to get high. We really want to normalize that the majority of teens are not doing this. So really, really drive that point home. And some of them may be surprised by this. You know, oftentimes they think, oh, everybody's doing it, but that's not the case. And we have data to support it. So what can you do to help? The issues of illicit fentanyl and opioid overdoses affect not just every community in our state, but communities all over the entire country. And these certainly are not small problems, but that doesn't mean that we are powerless. Each and every single one of you are powerful, you have a voice, and you absolutely can and should be a part of the solution. So these are a few things you can take action on. The first and most important one, which we'll talk about, is the importance of not taking or sharing pills that weren't prescribed to you. The second is learning about and using refusal skills. The third is understanding the difference between positive and negative peer pressure. And the fourth is knowing how to be a good friend to others. And every small action that you take adds up to make a big difference, not just in your life, but in the lives of your friends and of your loved ones too. Okay, so let's talk about this in more detail. First off, it is very, very important to never take a pill from someone else or to share your pills prescribed by a physician. So illicit fentanyl can be in fake prescription pills that look like Adderall, OxyContin, or Percocet. And the majority of young people who encounter illicit fentanyl do so accidentally because they are mistaking a fake pill for a real prescription pill. And young people typically access these pills on social media, or it could be from a friend, and you may have no idea where your friend got it from. So your friend may or may not know that it has fentanyl in it. So even if you trust your friend, do not take a pill that they are giving to you. This is one of the simplest and best ways to make sure that you and your friends don't accidentally come into contact with fentanyl. So never take or share pills that haven't been prescribed to you. It's also important to understand and use refusal skills. Can anyone tell me what a refusal skill is? This may be a newer concept to middle schoolers, but this is the high school presentation, so they may already know these things. So it's up to you how much depth you want to go into about this. I'm going to walk through all of these examples just so you're equipped with the knowledge that you need, but feel free to kind of breeze over it or take a deeper dive depending on what the students already seem to know. So they will likely tell you that it's a way to say no, and that's correct. Refusal skills are practical and concrete ways that you can refuse offers to try pills or any other type of drug, or to just avoid a situation altogether. And you may not be comfortable using all of these, but what I want you to think about as we go through them is choosing one or two that you feel comfortable with and that feel like something that you could use if you ever found yourself in a situation where you need them. So let's go through an example. And this is a good opportunity to have some engagement and interaction. You can ask students to read each of these and then prompt them to respond with what they think it is. So who can read me the first orange one? Make an excuse. What could this look like? What does this mean? Yeah, this strategy sounds like I've got a test tomorrow. I've got sports practice I can't miss, or I have family coming into town. Any sort of explanation for why you don't want to do what's being offered you. Can someone read me the yellow one? Avoid the situation. What does this mean? Yeah, so this strategy is about not going to places or hanging out with people who may be likely to try pills or other drugs. So it could be declining an invitation to a party. It could be not going to a certain person's house. Who can read me the pink one? Send a signal. What does this mean? At this point, high schoolers may have an idea of what this means. The middle schoolers will often guess that it's like a gesture, your friend was saying like, hey, I need help by sending you some sort of signal, which is on the right track and can be accurate for sure. But what this really means for our purposes is agreeing on a code that you can text or call to your parent, caregiver, or even an older sibling to let them know that you want them to come pick you up as soon as possible. And this could be a code word, a phrase, or an emoji. And depending on your group of students, sometimes they like to come up with what their code word is going to be and share that with you. So, especially with the middle schoolers, sometimes I'll go around and say, what's your code word? Like, what would it be if you talk to your parents about this? And they get really excited about that. So, you can determine if that's something the high schoolers would think is fun to talk about. Can someone read me the white one? Pass the blame. I like to pull in a personal story here because this is one that my parents used to say. They said, you can always blame me. So pass the blame to your parent or caregiver. I'd be totally grounded if my parent found out and just move along. Can someone read that first blue one? Offer an alternative. What does that mean? This is about suggesting a different activity that you would rather do. Another great opportunity to get students involved because they love to share the things they like to do. What would you suggest instead? What would you rather do? And they'll say, go to an art class, play a sport, grab a bite to eat, go to the park, take a walk, play video games. That one comes up all the time. Can anyone read the next blue one? Be honest. Did you know that no is a complete sentence? It is totally okay to be honest and say that you simply do not want to try what's being offered. No. You don't know an explanation, but that being said, I recognize this one can feel really hard to do in the face of pressure, but it does work. Who can read me the last orange one? Be an advocate. What does that mean? Yeah, we've been talking about how this program is called Friends for Life, and your friends care what you think, and you have more influence than you know. So if you're ever in a position to not only refuse drugs, but take it a step further and share what you know about the risk of experimenting with pills that very well could be fake and could have illicit fentanyl in them, that is something you absolutely should do. Every single time you stand up for yourself, you give other people permission to do the same thing. And your strength makes other people stronger too. Let's take 2 minutes. I want you to talk to your neighbor, talk at your tables, and explain which one of these you'd be most likely to use and why. So I'll take a break. They'll all talk amongst each other. It's up to you, depending on if your group is really chatty or engaged. You can go around and have people share, like which one did you decide you're most comfortable with? I've gone around the room and had everybody share before. And I'm always pleasantly surprised to hear how many people say that they would choose just to be honest and say, no, I don't want to. Okay, before we move on, we're going to complete a brief activity. So, like I said at the beginning, we're not actually going to do this activity, but I'm going to walk through and explain what it is. And again, there's a full lesson plan on the website, which I will show you where that is. And you can print it out and use it the day of in your classroom. The goal of the high school activity is to help students recognize that they have influence over their friends when it comes to experimenting with drugs like prescription pills. And so the reason that this activity was selected is because middle school students are kind of entering that adolescent phase. And the balance between their focus on family and friends is beginning to tip towards friends, but that transition is largely complete by high school. So it made sense to talk about peer influence with the high school group. And so by the end of the activity, we want students to feel really empowered to protect their friends by using their influence in positive ways. This is a part of the worksheet that you can pass out. It'll start out by showing some questions related to a national survey. So a national survey asked young people how likely they would be to listen to and trust the following people for advice not to use or to stop using drugs and alcohol. And so they can work at tables or they can work independently to make their guesses. What percentage of teens say that they trust messages from doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers, peers, friends, parents, or other guardians, counselors, and teachers? So they can estimate anywhere from 0 to 100% for each. Then you'll give them a couple of minutes to complete reflection questions. So, which group do you believe to be the most trustworthy? Why do you think that? And then you can get some responses from students, have them share why they think these things, and then you'll display the results. So 68% of teenagers say that they would trust doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers the most if they said to not use or stop using drugs. 67% of friends or peers. So that number is really, really close to the percentage we have for doctors. 63% parents, 54% counselors, and 49% teachers. So you'll give the students a couple of minutes to reflect again. Did any of these results surprise you? Which one? See if anybody wants to share. And then what does this tell you about how much your friends value your advice when it comes to not using drugs? And the hope is that some of their responses will include, young people put a lot of trust in their friends' advice. You have a lot of influence over your friends. Now, there's a reason this campaign is called Friends for Life, and it's because every healthy, supportive friendship, relationship, and connection that we have, it helps to protect us, and it lowers the risk that we'll ever experiment with pills or any other type of drugs. And so when you truly show up for your friends, you help to protect them too. So I want to talk a little bit about peer pressure. Can anybody tell me what peer pressure is? Responses will vary, but typically it'll say things like when someone forces you to do something, or when somebody keeps pestering you over and over and over again until you cave and do what they want. But, peer pressure always has a reputation of being a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Positive peer pressure can motivate you to grow, to try new things, and to discover new things about yourself. And so learning the difference between positive and negative peer pressure can help you to learn who you might want to spend more time with. So I want you all to think of some examples of when your friend encouraged you to do something positive. You can see a couple of examples on the screen here. Maybe it's they convinced you to study and you got a better grade, or they encouraged you to try out for an after-school sport or apply for an after-school job. So just know that your friends care what you think and you can use your influence as good. And I want you to flip your worksheet over and we're going to build a web of all the examples of positive peer pressure. So go ahead and write some examples in each of those little bubbles on your worksheet. So give them a few minutes to complete this activity. Once you do, you can ask for examples. They encouraged me to apply for college. They encouraged me to try a new hobby. It could be anything. But your friends should not be encouraging you to do something that could harm you. So I want you to start thinking about examples of negative peer pressure. It could be that you convince someone to skip a class, you encourage someone to gossip, which can really hurt people, or you push someone to take an unsafe risk, like drinking or taking drugs, things that could cause real harm. So I want you to go back into your pairs or at your tables and brainstorm examples of negative peer pressure and write them in these different bubbles. So give them a few minutes to complete this, and then you'll do reflection one more time. At this point, you'll probably want everybody to work on their own, and they can respond to one or more of these questions. If you have time, you can go through all three. You can choose them, or you can tell them to choose one, Or if you don't have enough time at all, you can let them know to please take this worksheet home and that their assignment is to reflect on them at a later time. So the questions are, what's the difference between positive and negative peer pressure? We want them to think about how it makes them feel. Maybe negative peer pressure makes them feel bad, anxious, or worried, but positive peer pressure may motivate them. Can you think of a time when you positively influenced a friend? What did you do to help change their mind? And what can you say or do to help someone that you know if your friend was thinking about or was already experimenting with prescription pills? How could you be there for them? So responses could be talking to them, listening, encouraging them to get help, including them in healthy activities, a variety of different responses. So great, great, great opportunity for reflection. And to wrap up the activity, we'll just present a couple more slides. So the friends that you're making during these years will really influence your choices. They influence your future. It is totally possible that the friendships you're making right now will last your entire lifetime. And friends are great because they give us a sense of belonging. They help us to learn to care for one another, to respect and communicate with others. And it's very important to reflect on the qualities that you want in a friend, what values are important to share, and how you expect to be treated in healthy friendship. So as you're meeting new people and forming new friendships, these are some questions you can ask yourself. Does this person seem to really care about me? Does this person respect me? Is this person being open and honest with me? Does this person share or support my goals? And what other questions might you ask yourself to help you know whether or not someone's being a good friend to you? And one part about being a really good friend is recognizing when someone might be struggling or might be at greater risk for experimenting with pills. The three most common risk factors for somebody um, to go out and seek pills tend to be mental health challenges like stress, anxiety, or depression, physical pain, such as from an injury, and social pressure. So somebody may be more likely to experiment with a pill if they're struggling with emotional pain and they want to take that pill to try and get the pain to go away. People who are struggling with emotional pain may be more likely to try things alone, which can be dangerous. Somebody who has physical pain may seek out prescription pills to try and get that physical pain to go away. So it's really important if you have an injury to go seek out help from a doctor. And then social pressure. So teens who are in social settings where others are drinking, taking pills, or using drugs may be more likely to try pills. So if somebody isn't acting like their usual self, it's important to try talking to them about what's going on and learn how you can be there for them. And if the problem seems really serious, you should talk to a trusted adult too. Let's wrap it up by talking about naloxone. Has anybody heard of naloxone or Narcan? Narcan is the brand name. Yeah, so naloxone is a medication that reverses opioid overdoses, and it's available in two different forms. It's most commonly available as a nasal spray, but there's also an injectable version. And it's simple, it's safe to use, it's legal to use, and it's actually available to buy at places like CVS and Walgreens. And in Washington, we have laws called Good Samaritan laws. Can anyone tell me what's a Good Samaritan law? Good Samaritan laws protect people who call 911 in the event of an overdose emergency from getting into any sort of legal trouble. So if you are with someone who you believe has overdosed, you absolutely can and should always call 911. That is the very, very first thing that you do. And then if you have naloxone available, it's something that you can administer to try and help the person wake up while you're waiting for medical attention to arrive. So how does it work? We talked about how our brains have opioid receptors. So naloxone or Narcan is a type of medication called an opioid antagonist. And what that means is it blocks opioids from binding or attaching to the receptors in our brain. And if someone is overdosing on opioids, naloxone can help to reverse the effects and help them to wake up and start breathing again. But depending on the amount of opioid that was taken or amount of fentanyl that was pressed into a pill, which you may or may not know, naloxone may only wake somebody up temporarily and they may need multiple doses every few minutes. And so that's why it's really, really essential to dial 911 and ensure that the person has medical attention on the way and they're getting to the hospital as soon as possible. Naloxone does not have an effect on someone who's not using opioids, so you can't hurt someone even if they're not overdosing. Um, It also is not going to work to treat the effects of other drugs or alcohol. It only works on opioids like illicit fentanyl. It's also not habit forming. There aren't side effects, but if you gave it to somebody who regularly uses opioids, they may wake up and feel sick, and that's because they're going through withdrawal symptoms. But I want you to be aware of what this is because it is the most effective tool that we have to save lives in the event of an overdose emergency. Okay, at this time, I'm going to walk through the Friends for Life website and provide you a little tour and explanation of all the tools. We may have some funding at ESD to order print materials, so we'll do our best to accommodate any requests come in. You can reach out to me if you'd like copies of print materials, and if we have the budget available, we'll help to get those to you. But this is the website, wafriendsforlife.com. On the homepage, it just kind of walks through an explanation of what the different resources are. So there's a start the conversation section. So information and resources for parents, caregivers, educators, other trusted adults to talk to teens about opioids and fentanyl. There's a whole section on overdose prevention. So you'll notice that in the Friends for Life curriculum package itself, it really just explains what an overdose is, what it looks like, and what naloxone is, but it doesn't take a deep dive into how to actually respond and what administering naloxone looks like. So if you want to go into a little bit more depth, you can look at the resources here, and there's some videos. Where to get naloxone, there's a map, and then toolkits, which we're going to jump into. So on the right over here, there are 3 toolkits: parents and caregivers, prevention partners, and harm reduction partners. We're going to go to this prevention partners section. You'll see all the beautiful resources. Again, these were developed with youth, and so they're really, really great. If you scroll down, you can use the jump links to get to certain sections, but there's also a point of contact if you want to order some resources. Again, if we don't have any available, you can reach out to Devin to request them. There's also some culturally specific materials that were created and informed by Native people in Washington, so you can take a look at For Our Lives and Healing of the Canoe Project if you work with a Native population. These are all the print and digital materials, social media posts, brochures. This teen conversation guide is really great because it's printer friendly, so you can just click print at your office, and you could always put copies of these in anything that goes home with parents or families. Middle school posters, high school posters. Youth seem to like these kind of smaller cards for their backpacks, so like wallet cards or little mini postcards. Those ones are really great. And then down here are the presentations and activities. So there's a parent presentation, which is in English and Spanish, a middle school presentation. Here's the middle school activity, high school presentation, and high school activity. Again, there is a script in both of these presentations. And so you can use that as a starting point. I expanded upon a lot of what was written in the script. And so what I've presented to you is a little bit more comprehensive, but I've used everything that's in the approved Friends for Life toolkit. And at the bottom, here's some videos in case you want to play those in the classroom, take a look at them first. And then under education, actually it's under overdose prevention too. There's a facts and frequently asked questions. So if you like to be a little bit more prepared for anything that students might ask you, there's some FAQs right here. So, what are some other names for fentanyl? Can you overdose by touching fentanyl? A little bit more detail about the Good Samaritan laws. So all sorts of great stuff here for you to take a look at. Lastly, I just want to talk about best practices for using this. So first and foremost, share the materials. Put up posters in your building, give out stickers and buttons, distribute resources to the students, send brochures and information home with parents. If you've got an event or other school-related communications going out, it's really important that it's not just educators discussing this with youth, but other trusted adults and parents are as well. And like I demonstrated today, present this information in your classrooms. Like I said, the presentation comes with a script, but best practice is to customize the content to meet the needs of your student population. It's really a flexible program, so you can take bits and pieces that you want to use as a part of your classroom education. You can present the full comprehensive program the way I have today. Just be sure to stick to the facts, but Feel free to expand in certain areas if you feel like students need a little bit more on something, or modify and provide a little bit less. Maybe they already know a ton about refusal skills and you don't need to go into that level of depth. Like that is totally okay. Just do what works best for your school. As far as how and where you present this, it's totally up to you. As we talked about at the very, very beginning, best practice is to incorporate the information into existing educational curriculum that you're already offering to students. So it's not meant to be a super big lift. If you're already teaching about tobacco, cannabis, alcohol, and other drugs, like add some information and content in about opioids. If you are a SAP or a PI at your school, include this in your prevention education series. If you don't have time for the full hour-long presentation and activity, just take your favorite slides and plug them into what you're already doing. If you are a health education or PE instructor that's teaching health class, incorporate this into your existing substance abuse education. Of course, it'd be fantastic if you could have a whole class on opioids. And if you have time to do that, great. If you don't have time to do that, at least add a little bit of information and the main key messages about opioids and fentanyl and the importance of not taking or sharing pills that weren't prescribed to you. So that's all we have today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of the solution and helping to educate youth about the importance of prevention. I hope that this was a valuable use of your time. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. Again, my name is Mandy Feeks, and I work at ESC 112 on the Prevent team. Have a good day.